to Be the Light. My name is Denise Rezsonya, and we have a really, I think, fun and exciting show for you here today. We are filming live at the Wofford Theater, and we have some guests from Guerin High School with us today. We've got Linton, who is a senior, and Principal Mr. James McNeany to join us to tell us about our trip that they recently took to Washington, D.C. to see the Pope. And I have been so excited all day to do this show and hear about this, because this is really cool. So to start with, I'd really like to know how this kind of came about that you guys went to D.C.
Well, I got a call from our representative in Congress, Susan Brooks, and the first message that I got, to be clear, I really got excited because I got a voicemail late in the evening, listened to it in the morning, and it said, "Hey, we have 4 tickets for you to go to Washington, D.C. to see the Pope deliver an address to the joint session of Congress." And my first thought was, unbelievable. We're going to be in Congress when the Pope gets to give this address.
Yeah.
And when I called her, she said, now, I want to explain exactly what this entails. And she said, there's somewhere between 30 and 50,000 people to be out on the lawn to be there. And so that initial excitement of being inside, went down just a little. But really, when I thought about it, when I heard about it, especially when I first heard that this was the first time ever that a pope has ever addressed the United States Congress in the history of our country, I knew it would be an historic event. And certainly we knew right away that it was something that we wanted to take students to and be able to be there. And so we felt really blessed to be able to pick 2 great students in Linton and Gabe Ganser. And Father Haan and I served as chaperones, and we took them out there to view the address on the lawn of the Capitol building, and then also to spend a little bit of time with Representative Susan Brooks in her office afterwards as her guests.
Cool. So then how did you pick the students? I mean, was it just a random lottery? I mean, how did these lucky guys get chosen?
No, it was that was a really hard choice when we knew we could pick 2 students to go on this trip. These 2 gentlemen serve as the head of our Catholic Life Committee at our school, and that's something that they were chosen to do due to their 3 years of service in that club and service to our school. And so they're definitely 2 student leaders that we have in the building, and at the same time 2 kids that really take their Catholic faith very seriously. And so when we think about Guerin Catholic High School and students who, A, would represent our school very well, but then B, students that would really appreciate this opportunity and that it is, and something that students that would remember it forever, these are 2 students that really stood out as students that we would want to bring along on this trip.
Yeah. Well, how cool. So Kent, what was your reaction when you found out?
Well, Mr. McNeany pulled me aside at the beginning of the day and said, "Hey, I have an opportunity for you and Gabe, so you could come into my office sometime during the day." And I was like, I had no idea what it would be. Yeah. So Gabe and I decided to go in after 4th period, and he took no time to tell us. He just went right out and said it, and said, "Would you guys like to go to Washington, D.C. with us to go see the Pope?" And I can speak for myself, but my jaw just dropped. I was like, that's like an opportunity of a lifetime. Absolutely. So I was really excited.
Yeah. So when did you guys find out about this?
Probably 3 or 4 weeks before it happened, somewhere around there, I want to say. After doing this, it sounds like a little bit of research that over the summer this all sort of came together, and the Pope announced that he was coming to the United States a little while back, and then it sounds like John Boehner, Speaker of the House for a little bit longer, John Boehner, worked on this and was able to actually secure this, and it sounds like it became public sometime around July that this was going to happen, and I guess at some point they were trying to decide what kind of audience or how they would want to do this, and it's my understanding that every senator and congressman or woman was able to receive 50 tickets that they were able to give out to their people. Different legislators chose different ways to give those out, and Susan Brooks said that she actually is a Catholic. She goes to St. Monica's there on the northwest side of Indianapolis, and she said the first thing that came to mind is to offer it to Catholic schools. So there were a couple other Catholic high schools that were represented. I know Bishop Chittard was represented there as well. And so, again, we found out about it probably about 4 weeks in advance, which was
so you
enough
had
time
a little prep time?
A little bit, enough to make some quick travel arrangements and be able to see that this is something that we were going to be able to do.
So how many days did you guys actually stay in DC then?
We flew out, I think, 7 o'clock the morning before the Pope gave his address to Congress, and we spent the remainder of that day just touring DC, and we went to the parade that the Pope
Yes.
was holding around the Capitol.
Mm-hmm.
So we spent a majority of the morning doing that, and then we got up early the next day.
There he is in his Pope mobile right there on the screen.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And then we went to the Capitol the next morning to be a part of the 30,000 people in the lawn when he gave his address.
Mm-hmm.
And then we left at night.
Okay. So pretty much in and out. Wow.
Yep.
Just one night. Yeah.
And there's just so much to see in DC. Little known fact, I used to live there, so I
Oh,
know
wow.
there's tons of stuff to see and do there. But it sounds like you guys were able to pack in a decent amount in that time.
I think one of the highlights too for me was we tried to get a tour of the Capitol the day before,
Mhm.
and they had shut off the tours. I don't know if it was for the whole day, but at least at the time we had to get there, we had to pick up our tickets from Susan Brooks's office in the afternoon, and by that time they had shut off tours to ramp up their security and sweep and everything and be ready for him. But the next day, Wednesday, after we heard the address, we were able to get a tour, and I don't know, one of the highlights for me, I watched the Republican debate just a couple weeks before,
Mhm.
and then we got to go and sit up and watch the Senate in session, and Senator Ted Cruz from Texas was actually there
Mhm.
testifying about a bill, so it was neat to be able to see him after just
Absolutely.
seeing him on the debates a couple weeks ago.
Yeah. So Kent, what about you? What's a memorable experience for you there? What's like the biggest thing that stands out?
I would say just being in the lawn when the Pope was giving his address,
Mhm.
because although we're not actually in the Capitol at the time, they had a big like jumbotron right outside that all these people could watch, and it was really interesting to hear everybody's reaction and everybody's excitement
Yeah.
when he was giving the address and when he came out on the balcony to bless us.
Mhm.
And it was just a really cool experience to see everybody come together and get just really excited and joyful about the Pope being in the United States.
Yeah, absolutely. So, in your eyes, why is this a historic event?
Just because the opportunity that the Pope comes to the United States to give the first address to Congress, it has not happened before, and to just be there and experience just the United States, the Americans like experience to what the Pope has to say.
Mhm.
It's really cool to just have actual personal interaction with him,
Yeah.
except for him being like all the way across the ocean and out. So
Yeah, absolutely. So now, when you guys came back, did you get to speak at school about this experience, or did you get to somehow bring a message back to your classmates?
I know that when I came back, everybody was pretty aware that I had traveled to DC, and I got a lot of questions about it, was just able to testify to my experience. I never really was able to get together a big group and talk about it, but I definitely did talk to many people and faculty about my experience.
So for those of them that are watching now, is there a specific message or anything that you want to get across to them?
Just how cool it was in order to be in the place where everybody else was when the Pope was giving his address.
Mhm.
It was really an opportunity of a lifetime, and in order to represent Guerin Catholic, and not only to like the Washington D.C. area, but being able to talk and eat lunch with Congresswoman Susan Brooks,
Mhm.
it was just pretty memorable and pretty life-changing.
Yeah, absolutely. What a great experience. So before we take a break, I want to thank our show sponsors, Jim Wofford, the Wofford Theater and Hamilton County Television. And we are going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back with our guest from Guerin Catholic.
You know, when Margaret and I decided to sell the old estate here, we had only one choice in signage. Logan Street signs and banners. Conveniently not located on Logan Street anymore, but rather located on 10th Street on the south side of Noblesville. Well, we sold the old beauty, and we were able to buy this wonderful estate. and we had so much money left over, I was able to buy this beautiful 1968 Eldorado Cadillac for Margaret. Only 472,000 miles. Margaret loves it because it's got those big seats and that heavy-duty suspension to support her svelte frame. Next time you're looking for signs or banners, call old Jim at Logan Street Signs and Banners, 773-7200. Conveniently not located on Logan Street anymore.
Everyone knows it's easy to find first-run movies in the big theaters. But where can you go to watch your favorite classic movies on the big screen for the perfect night out? Why rent a flick when you can rent the entire theater? Call today to reserve our 32-seat theater for your next event, or just stop by to see what's showing this weekend. The 14 by 7 foot screen and the high quality digital surround sound system offers all the amenities you would expect from the big theaters, with a laid back atmosphere and comfortable seating of your own home. Wofford Theater at 1744 South 10th Street in Noblesville gives you the classic movies you want with a big theater experience.
Welcome back to Be the Light. My name is Denise Rezsonya, and I'm your show host. And since I always seem to forget to give you my contact information, if you want to reach me, my website is www.denisemrezsonya.com, and all of my contact information is up there. That's DENISEMREZSONYA. And we are back talking about this awesome trip that these gentlemen from Guerin Catholic High School got to take to Washington, D.C. recently to see the Pope. So we now are joined by Gabe Ganser, who is a senior over at Guerin Catholic, and we welcome back Mr. James McNeany, the principal. So, your turn on the hot seat. We already know how you were chosen, so what was your reaction when you found out?
Well, much like Mr. McNeany, I mean, I was thrilled, but I was kind of thinking that we would get to meet the Pope, and then I realized that it's kind of far-fetched. But anyways, it was really great. I was ecstatic. I was just thrilled. My jaw was dropping, and I was like, this is awesome. I get to go to Washington, D.C. with the chaplain, principal, and fellow classmate, friend.
Yeah.
So I was really excited, and I was just really happy.
So what did your parents say when you told them?
My mom, she's a great influence on my life. She loves the Catholic faith, and she's all into the Pope and everything. And she gave me a huge hug. She knew about it before me.
Oh, okay.
But she's like, I heard it, kept edging on about the big news, and then she was being her lively self and just gave me a huge hug and says, I'm so proud of you and stuff like that.
Well, that's really cool.
His mom's a bit of a hugger, and I thought she was going to snap my back after when she found out. So she was pretty excited too.
That's great. So now we talked about the fact that you guys went to the parade. You got to see him go by in his Pope mobile. How close were you able to get to him? Because it looked pretty close in the picture.
Yeah, I'd say 50 feet roughly. It was really cool. He was right there. It was hard to see because everybody was holding up their phones and everything, but you could definitely see. He was looking the other way most of the time, but at the very end, he looked back and waved to us and gave us a little blessing. But I'd say around 50 feet was the closest we got, which is still probably better than I thought we would.
Yeah.
So it was really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you have any idea, I didn't look it up, do you have any idea how many people were at that parade?
No, tough to tell, but they had the security around that parade even pretty tight. I mean, you had you couldn't get a vehicle anywhere close to the parade route, and then to even get to where you could stand along the route, we had to go through pretty tight security. Security was tight all around throughout the entire city, which I suppose is a minor inconvenience, but it definitely, with the historic event that's happening, with unfortunately all the terrorism we have in the world, it made me feel safe to know that wherever we were, especially when we got anywhere close to Congress or to where the Pope was, that everybody had gone through tight security to get in there.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Gabe, for you, what was the highlight for you of the trip?
I'd say just being in front of the Capitol building with just a bunch of other Catholics and Christians, just being there for the same reason and for this historic event of the Pope just coming and greeting us all. I thought that was, it was very historic when he talked to the Congress, and the Joint Congress, never been done before, but I really liked it when he came out and talked to the public and everyone that was in there, even though he was talking in, I believe, Spanish, but there was a translator with him right there, so we understood everything he said.
Okay.
And it was really cool being there and getting blessed by the Pope.
Absolutely.
It was awesome.
Yeah.
And him asking us to bless him and pray for him.
That is so cool.
It was awesome.
So, as far as anything that you took back to your school, what messages did you take back to the students?
Well, in many of my classes, I know my English class, Miss Nickham, she would ask me a lot of questions to tell the whole class. That would happen a lot in every class, and I would just tell them about the great experience and just how memorable and how blessed I was to be able to go on here. And didn't really carry a message, I feel like, but I let them in on the trip and told them what the Pope talked about and stuff like that.
Okay. So now you guys did mention that you got to do a little sightseeing while you were there.
Mm-hmm.
So do you have a favorite from your sightseeing time?
I liked, I don't know, I like to go, we went into the Jefferson building and to go just see all the old artifacts. I don't really know, but
The Library of Congress.
Library of Congress, that's what it was. But it was just great. I've been there before, but it was really refreshing to see everything. That's really all I have to say about that.
Well, that actually answered my next question. I was going to ask you if you had been there before. Had you been there before?
I have. I've been there a couple times, and the city in general just has a very historic significance to me. Obviously, as the capital of our nation. Just kind of personally, my favorite thing to do is always to visit the Lincoln Memorial and stand there and read the Gettysburg Address before the gigantic statue of Abraham Lincoln. That's just something that seems very meaningful to me.
So now, putting you kind of on the hot seat here, what message did you bring back to the students from this experience?
I definitely had some students talk to me individually about what I thought the trip was and everything, and I think for me, I've heard lots of stories of people who have seen our few popes that have been here during my lifetime, and I always hear about these stories of you just maybe you feel the weather change or you feel a different just this presence as he kind of drives by or gets in proximity to him. And I'll say I felt some of that, but I think for me, and I'm probably stealing a little bit of Father Haan's language because he kind of said this at one point, but he said to see the yearning of the crowds and the people who want to see him and get close to him and hear his message was really incredible, and I guess it gives me some hope for the future, some hope for our faith, that to see the type of excitement that he can still bring to our country, to be here, and people can hinge on his every word and want to hear what message he does bring. And it was a pretty incredible message.
So now, did you have a favorite during your sightseeing time?
During my favorite sites, I had never toured the inside of the House of Representatives and then the side of Congress. So just to see both of those happen, and we went in the House of Representatives first, and they were doing something in there. It was pretty sparsely populated, and a few people, some kind of committee meeting, and I didn't recognize any of the people that were in there that were testifying. And then we go over to the Senate side, and right away we quickly realized, wait, I think that's Ted Cruz down there. And they were doing some kind of some sort of committee hearing about changing a street name in front of the Chinese embassy to an author a political prisoner who had been there, and apparently the prime minister maybe, or the delegate, or somebody important in China was about to visit the United States, and they wanted to get this through very quickly to change the street name out in front of the Chinese embassy to this political prisoner in order to make that statement to the Chinese government that imprisoning this man for whatever he had done was not right. And there was a little bit of a tension in the room as people didn't. There was a dissenter or two, and it didn't get through. And Senator Cruz, who's a very good speaker and very dramatic, expressed his disappointment with that in the United States government and the bureaucracy that can't make a decision quickly in order to get something like this through. So there was definitely a little bit of excitement there in seeing that. And I particularly enjoyed I don't know, maybe in there for 15 minutes at the most, but it was pretty exciting.
Great. Well, I thank you guys so much for your time. When we come back, we are going to have Father Haan on the show, so we'll be back in just a moment.
You know, when Margaret and I decided to sell the old estate here, we had only one choice in signage. Logan Street signs and banners. Conveniently not located on Logan Street anymore, but rather located on 10th Street on the south side of Noblesville. Well, we sold the old beauty, and we were able to buy this wonderful estate. And we had so much money left over, I was able to buy this beautiful 1968 Eldorado Cadillac for Margaret. Only 472,000 miles. Margaret loves it because it's got those big seats and that heavy-duty suspension to support her svelte frame. Next time you're looking for signs or banners, call old Jim at Logan Street Signs and Banners, 773-7200. Conveniently not located on Logan Street anymore.
Everyone knows it's easy to find first-run movies in the big theaters. But where can you go to watch your favorite classic movies on the big screen for the perfect night out? Why rent a flick when you can rent the entire theater? Call today to reserve our 32-seat theater for your next event, or just stop by to see what's showing this weekend. The 14 by 7 foot screen and the high quality digital surround sound system offers all the amenities you would expect from the big theaters, with a laid back atmosphere and comfortable seating of your own home. Wofford Theater at 1744 South 10th Street in Noblesville gives you the classic movies you want with a big theater experience.
Welcome back to Be the Light here at the Wofford Theater. And real quick, I want to thank our show sponsors, Jim Wofford, the Wofford Theater and Hamilton County Television. And I am excited to introduce you to Father Thomas Haan, who was also on this trip. We were. So what was your reaction when you found out you were going?
Well, I had a couple of invitations early on, probably late spring, early summer, to go to Philadelphia.
Okay.
For the Pope first went to Washington, D.C., then made a stop in New York, of course, to speak to the United Nations and visit the World Trade Center Memorial. And then his main focus of the trip was actually in Philadelphia with the World Meeting of Families.
Okay.
And that lasted all week, but he showed up for the last couple and dressed the crowd, and they had a festival where there were different speakers and musicians. And I know there were people from all over the world going to the World Meeting of Families. It would have been a madhouse. Just literally hundreds of thousands of extra people all in downtown Philadelphia. So I declined those offers, especially being a new teacher at Guerin Catholic and not wanting to have a substitute for a week straight, that sort of thing. So when this opportunity came up, it piqued my interest because I think Washington, D.C. would have been a bit more subdued with regards to crowds. There were still tons of people there, but less so than Philadelphia. And the idea that we had already obtained a ticket, I didn't have to fight a lot of the big masses he had. It was hard to get in to go some of his liturgies. We already had our ticket for the live stream of his congressional talk, so I thought this will be a simple trip comparatively to my other options. So I was thrilled as well. I have a great reverence for the role of the Pope, and certainly a great appreciation for the man of Pope Francis. So it was awesome to be in his presence.
Yeah, well, that's great. So now you did mention that you had followed the rest of it on television.
Sure.
So kind of what's your feedback, your interpretation on everything?
Yeah, so a lot of his talk, of course, in Washington, D.C. was directed towards President Obama, Senate, U.S. representatives, more on a somewhat policy level. It didn't direct policy, but gave a framework, especially in his talk to Congress. He gave 4 examples of Americans who have represented concepts we need to remember. He mentioned Abraham Lincoln, Martin Luther King Jr. He mentioned Dorothy Day, who founded the Catholic Worker Movement, and also he talked about a monk from Kentucky named Thomas Merton. And these people represented freedom, especially he was leaning towards religious freedom, certainly personal liberty and equality and inclusivity, but ultimately a meditative approach to peace, which Thomas Merton, and a care for the poor. These were figures people were somewhat familiar with, and they could relate and apply their job in Washington, D.C. with their example. When he moved to New York, it was a similar theme for the United Nations, more on a global policy effort. But when he finally got to Philadelphia, he got to the core and where he feels most comfortable. As he's talking about the family, about the faith which is nurtured in the family. He talked a lot about even the struggles of the family. He makes these great jokes about, bickering in the house and, the cross of frustrations, and not to mention the mother-in-law, and everybody laughs and that sort of thing. So I think in a practical, down-to-earth fashion, he was encouraging the family unit to be a place of love and a place of faith, so that we can influence the larger culture with that same faith and love. So I think that was part of this huge message for coming to the United States.
Well, and he seems extremely personable in what I've seen. So
sure, he's a pastor first. I mean, he became a priest and a bishop and cared for his flock in an intimate level there in Argentina, and now he's just got a bigger flock, and he's trying to meet more of his flock by coming to the United States.
Well, and to your point about Washington, D.C., I'm kind of interested to see how the trickle-down comes from that.
Sure. That's yet to be seen.
Yeah.
I think everybody was moved by his words, his example, certainly, and his care for the poor. How to go about that is probably, there's a lot of arguments and different perspectives with regards to leaders in Washington, D.C., but I think you saw interviews with John Boehner and others. They were in tears because of his affection for others. I think if anything, he is telling us to get beyond ourselves. Quit being selfish.
Yeah.
Quit thinking of only about yourself. You're in some sense your heart shrinks, and you don't thrive as an individual. And if that happens at the individual level, then your family begins to shrink. Your nation begins to crumble. When you cease caring about the other, including the environment, then we're in trouble. So it's a good reminder for all of us.
Absolutely. So, for you, what was the most memorable part of the trip?
Well, being in his presence twice, certainly at the parade, it was a quicker experience of him as he drove by, a more close visit. But when he came out on the balcony and blessed us, I had in my heart all the people back home, especially Catholic students and faculty, my own family. I wanted, through me, that the Pope would bless them too. They certainly admire him and couldn't be there. So those were definitely the most memorable points. I mean, we call him the Holy Father for a reason. I mean, he's holy, but he's our Father in faith, and so it's always good to be with your dad, your spiritual father. So I think that's why we all felt a sense of peace being in his presence.
So when Mr. McNeany was up earlier, he mentioned, excuse me, that just that presence that you just mentioned, but that presence, did you palpably feel something different when he was out there blessing you guys?
Yeah, and I don't want to over spiritualize it, but there was a tremendous joy. I mean, your heart is leaping in your chest when you're with him in his presence, because he is so joyful, and he is so filled with love and faith. So I think anybody's in his presence feels that in some way. It wasn't dramatic by any means, but certainly I was at peace and filled with joy when he drove by. So.
What an absolutely amazing experience. I'm so glad that you guys came on today and shared this with us, because this is just so cool. Did you have any other points you wanted to make before we wrap it up?
I think another point about that Capitol visit that happened right after his speech, I mean, first of all, we got to see right where he spoke just a couple hours after he spoke in the chamber there. But also in the main dome area, there's the Hall of Statues in the U.S. Capitol as well, and each state has a couple of statues to represent their state. And California's is Junipero Serra, who the Pope canonized near the Basilica of the National Shrine of the Immaculate Conception in Washington, D.C. the day before. Canonized him a saint, and for, I don't know, 20, 30 years his statue's been in the main building of the Capitol. And so after the Pope spoke to Congress, he stopped by and said a prayer in front of that statue. And so we were able to get up close to that statue and see that a canonized saint is represented right inside the Capitol building. So I took it as almost a symbolic moment of how the faith permeates all that we do, and it should permeate even, or at least influence the way we do government with regards to justice and respect for the dignity of the human person. I think Junipero Serra is a great example of that. So that was a neat moment too.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for your
Sure.
time, and we are out of time here today at Be the Light, but thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next week.